entrepreneur, traveler, food lover. I think that's how I would describe myself. I think our view was that if we were to move into a cost per converted user, then marketing becomes actually a revenue line item. Because for every dollar spent, if I can quantify that I can create greater dollars earned or profits earned, then there is clearly the amount which people could spend or the comfort they would have around working could be far greater. So a lot of delegated commerce will happen. And I think that's where advertising will also need to evolve, because earlier you were playing to an emotional connect with users. That, okay, I will book a flight ticket on an XYZ airline because I resonate with that brand. Now there is a functional decision making because you are not actually making that decision. Your voice assistant is figuring out, okay, this person likes this kind of a seat, he likes this price point, works for him, and based on that, a decision is made.
What's something new happening in your life right now?
Cocktail making.
Lovely. Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Just Ravi. Conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Hi, Anuj. So nice to
Hi,
have you on the
Jaswati.
show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Affle India is a global technology company with proprietary consumer intelligence platform that has successfully completed its IPO. If you had to share some of the challenges you faced in this journey, what would you like to share? Because this could serve as inspiration for people on a similar path.
One more thing, we are quite proud of you as a Mican also goal. I mean, it's small batches, not like a typical management institute. And from there, you have like a unicorn and maybe a decacorn, a centicorn in future. It's truly amazing.
Thank you so much. I think it's been an interesting journey. So I think we started the journey pretty early. If you see that, if you tracked, Apple started out in 2005. I came in as the co-founder in 2006, early 2006, and we wanted to create a company which was focused around mobile advertising. And I think in the early days, the biggest challenge was like even explaining to people within the industry, friends and family, what mobile advertising was all about. Because if you look at it, 2006, and I'm sure some of you and some of the people watching the channel might see that those are the times which is pre-smartphone. So pre-smartphone, when what people were doing on the phone was largely calling and maybe at max SMSing. And think like when we started out, I think our vision was very clear. We wanted to ensure, we were firm believers that this device would take a form and shape where a lot more content is consumed. And I think that was the conviction where we started out. I think sometimes, at many times during the journey, we felt that maybe did we start too early because the market wasn't ready. I think during this entire journey, we have learned, because I feel that in entrepreneurship, you're always evolving. So I think if personally, I've been an entrepreneur for over 15 years. So I think I've got 15 years of mistakes which I've learned from. And those are brilliant nuggets of information or learning from which you can grow. So I think more experience means that you've made more share of mistakes, and if you are refreshed and confident, that you've learned from them. And I think for us, the important thing was that we were clear that what we were building was for the long term. So I think a lot of people start entrepreneurship that, okay, I will build a company, I will raise money, sell it. And that's like a model which is prevalent, definitely in the Silicon Valley, has become quite prevalent even in India right now. I think we were firm believers that we were building something to last. If we are doing something which is adding value to the consumer and the marketer who's working with us, then clearly this is a business for the long term. And I think that is what has defined our journey, right from the investors who joined our journey. I think most of the investors who came into Affle were either customers or partners of Affle. So I think very different. I think didn't have the traditional VC kind of investors who came in as investors in the company. And even the path which we chose to go public, which I'm sure over the last few weeks we've seen a lot of Indian tech companies go public. But I think we went public in the India market way before this wave which we are seeing right now. And I think that was also as part of the conviction that when we were going public, I think the entire discourse was that our belief, which we truly stood for, is that while we have spent at that time 14, 15 years running the company, we believed that we were still on the runway. We were taking off. And that I think is very, very important. Staying refreshed in the journey because the industry is evolving very fast. And I think that's the reason we went and chose to go public, because we believed that we were building something which should outlast our lives.
So well said, Anuj. I'm going to take two of the things that you said, which are the normal things an entrepreneur gets stuck at, a setback, a failure. What should be the attitude to deal with it? Like you said, every mistake becomes an experience. That's a beautiful, resilient attitude that you just brush your hands off, get back, and with more energy keep going. And also when you said staying refreshed, which is amazing, which is an amazing attitude over the long term, because you have kept innovating, even with limited resources from the very beginning. So what would your advice be in terms of dealing with setbacks and how to keep innovating?
So I think one is to think of the journey. So I think the way we always thought of this journey was a marathon. And when you are running a marathon, then there can be many phases of those 100 or 500 meters when you would believe that you are way off. But you have to time your race. You have to time yourself so that you're peaking at the right moment and then winning the race. And I think for us, and I think that's where you need to switch off from what's happening around the world. And I think it's very, very difficult. Because even for us, when we started out as entrepreneurs, I think when we were running the race, there were many companies who started out at similar times. Many times you were feeling that people keep telling you that, okay, they are doing so well, this is happening. I think you need to trust yourself that this is a marathon journey, and it's not a journey that you have ran this lap the fastest that you are in. The marathon journey is still continuing. So I think that mindset is very, very important. Training your mindset that you're running a marathon and you're not running a sprint. And I think that mindset is super important. And I think if I was to put a business lens to it, I think one thing which we realized very early in our journey was that the technologies we work on will continue to change. The products we work on will evolve. There is no way, you can't fall in love with a particular product or technology because it will change faster than what you would imagine. I think what is important is to understand that, because if you don't start believing that, you can get a sense of disappointment. And I think once you know that that part is transient, what is the part? So if that is transient, if your products are transient, if your technology is transient, what is consistent? So I think your own resilience is consistent, which is what you can train. And second is business fundamentals, because we realized that if you were running the business for the long haul, then how quickly can you run a business profitably? Because at that time, if you are running the business profitably, you are not dependent on fuel being added through external investors or venture capitalists, which is something which I'm sure each business has its own nuance. We decided our journey that this is more us, because we believe that if we were to do the business fundamentals in place, hopefully we will have lesser chance of failure because the other parts will take care of itself. And I think that is what has been the case. So I think it's not that we knew which direction the industry is going, I think, but it's really around staying fresh, staying resilient, learning what's happening, taking that things will change, and enjoying that change rather than getting unnerved by it. And I think that helps you sleep in peace, and that helps you function properly also.
Right.
So beautifully said. Marathon mindset. I'm going to take it with me, Sarojit.
Right. So I think, one of the way to look at Afril is that it's more of a business model innovation. Like you said, technology keeps changing, but the way you sort of disrupted the whole market was, your focus on cost per converted user. And that is, was so different from what the other value propositions that were being offered in the marketplace. So how did you come to this kind of innovation? So there was a lot of alignment between what you're offering and what a marketer is wanting, which may not necessarily be the case in any other, value propositions.
I think it's a very, very interesting question. I think if you look at it, I think I studied it in the school, and I'm sure many of the people did. That it was often said that when you are advertising, it's like half of my advertising budget is going waste. I don't know which half, and that is traditionally, I think, what people have perceived of advertising. I think our view has been that while that is true in certain media because they are non-measurable, I think the advantage of digital or mobile advertising in particular is that everything you do can be measured. It can be measured better for certain kinds of businesses. So, for businesses where the transaction is happening on the mobile itself, the measurement is absolutely clear because you saw an ad, you clicked on it, you bought after that. Everything can be attributed to the advertising which you which you saw. Whereas if you're buying a soft drink bottle, might not be as clearly attributable because you walked into a store and picked it, but you can still build some attribution models there. I think our view was that when the market started evolving, when the entire e-commerce or digital world came in, where people were transacting immensely on the mobile phone, whether it's ordering a cab, ordering food, buying a mutual fund, or any kind of, or buying a shirt. Everything for many of us is happening online. And when that is happening, there was an opportunity where you could link the entire value chain. And I think that's where we came in, that if we link the value chain, because if marketing big starts being seen as a cost, then clearly there is a limitation which any enterprise can spend money on with marketing, because there is a advertising to sales ratio which most companies follow. Varies by category, but largely there is some overarching principle through which it is decided. I think our view was that if we were to move into a cost per converted user, then marketing becomes actually a revenue line item. Because for every dollar spent, if I can quantify that I can create greater dollars earned or profits earned, then there is clearly the amount which people could spend or the comfort they would have around working could be far greater. From a time, just think of it that in a traditional world, if somebody was selling advertising, if somebody was selling, say, advertising on hoardings, he would usually say, I have this hoarding costs X amount, X dollars per month, and you need to pay me. What happens to your business is your this thing. It's not really none of my prerogative. I think for us, we have switched it around. We are saying that even like, we don't sell hoardings, but this is just an example that when we are selling advertising, we are also selling the ROI which happens from it. And I think it's a thin line, but I think with the kind of attribution models which exist, with the kind of investments which we've made in data science and predictive analytics, I think a lot of that helps us. And that also pushes us because for this model to grow, we need to consistently innovate on technology and data sciences. So I think it's an interesting area, and I think that's where we've seen a lot of growth coming in and a differentiation versus companies selling advertising as a media cost to companies companies like ourselves who are trying to go in that, okay, we are giving you ROI, and if we are giving you ROI, then we are taking a share of that because clearly it's business growth metrics which you want and which is what we will deliver for you.
Right, right. Anuj, like you said, with the product that's changing, with the technology that's changing, with the government regulations that are changing, with such a lot of change, how is it that Affle India has kept, more than relevant?
So I think I think when many things are changing, I think the important thing which I said is consistency within the team and ensuring that we are refreshed. And I think for us, if I look back even in our journey, I think we've been blessed that many of the team members who've spent their entire careers as part of Affle because they've shared a value system around building something for the long haul. And we've also gained because we've also believed that we only know certain answers to problems. How do you build and partner with new people? And I think we've always consistently added more entrepreneurial spirits or passion within the team, either through ourselves getting them or partnering with other companies. And I think that has been very, very critical for us.
Right, right.
I think one of the key things which I have sort of seen in your value proposition coming through. You've pivoted quite a lot, and one of the things you mentioned that because you're not funded by venture capital, you could patiently focus on your business and not get directed by external noise or the pressure that a VC imposes. often a VC doesn't really know the business as intimately as an entrepreneur and drives it towards a certain goal which might not be aligned with the entrepreneur's vision. So I mean, if you look at your value proposition that you created, not only from a consumer's journey point of view, but also from the advertiser's requirement, you have at this point of time, I think, three propositions. One is obviously new consumer conversion. The second is your retargeting, and this online to offline journey. So for an advertiser, right from acquiring to sort of retargeting to taking this person across channels, you have like a sort of whole gamut of offerings. So a couple of these offerings were sort of through acquisitions. So I mean, there are two questions basically. And how did you sort of go on to develop such a meaningful value proposition and covers the whole consumer journey as well as advertiser journey in a business life cycle? And second is, what is the role that the acquisitions have played? Recently, you acquired Jamp also, right? So you've acquired a lot of companies and you've integrated them well into your value proposition, which is not really easy for a lot of companies to do. And I would sort of applaud you for that. So can you sort of explain this in some detail?
So I think on the consumer journey, I think the most important thing is to think of ourselves as consumers. So today, if you look at it, most of us, like our smartphones, have become an integral part of our existence. We don't realize how much we are dependent on it. And if you have to look at it, like earlier, the thing was that people would research online, buy offline. Now people are researching offline and then buying online. You might just be in a mall, check out something, and then go on to Amazon and order it because you get a better deal or better variety of offering. So I think a lot of these things are happening, and also what you have to realize is that a lot more of our devices are getting connected. So whether it is your smartphone, which is obviously connected to your TVs, to your Alexas, to the so many connected devices we are using in our house, and that is only going to grow dramatically. So I think the important thing of the integrated consumer journey for us is that how is it that you can have, because given that the journeys have become so blended and integrated, how can you ensure that you can deliver and track ROI? So I think when I was mentioning to you in the online first companies, it is easier because the ad itself leads to conversion. But many times when we work with offline companies, their conversion is walking into a mall or a store to pick that up and building something which is linking that entire journey. So I think it's really around holistically understanding the problem you're trying to solve and then consistently innovating either yourselves, and in some of those cases the innovation happens by partnering with like-minded entrepreneurs, which at least the world calls it acquisition, I call it partnership. Because it's not really, it's like, well, we know some parts well, but there are other entrepreneurs, bright entrepreneurs who know their industry, who've solved a certain problem and solved it far better than others. And I think in our journey it's been super important to align them, to ensure that whenever we are working with a particular company, which you're calling it an acquisition, it's a meeting of minds. It's around that how can we together as an entrepreneurial unit create greater success than what we could have created in isolation. And I think with that spirit is how we have innovated within the company and how we have partnered with many other like-minded entrepreneurs, which have helped us reach where we are today. And we are super happy with that part, that we can bond, that now we have many more co-founders within Affle Group, because people who have co-founded those companies are also in a way co-founders within Affle Group, because they are contributing and meaningfully adding innovation and value propositions to what we are offering to our clients.
Right. So, Anuj, now a lot of things have already been touched. We'll take it forward. So, consumer is looking at digital in a different way. COVID-19 has disrupted things. So, not just entertainment, gaming, and shopping, but even for fundamental services, health, education, finance, internet has become important. So, if you had to point out some consumer trends that marketers should watch out for, what would you like to say?
Like, we've looked at every media in isolation. Whereas what is happening is you look at a thing like connected TV. So I think many of us, and I think COVID-19 fast-tracked that today across the world, including markets like India, a lot of people are moving from linear TV to connected TV. And what that does is that pretty much you are streaming content on the internet because you're streaming content, the kind of advertising and content experiences you access is also then personalized rather than mass broadcast, which is what your TV or the media like that were. So I think that's a big change which is happening. I think connected TV as an industry will disrupt. It's like at the meeting ground of both digital and TV. So I think that's a key consumer trend which will drive obviously changes in marketing and advertising. I think the other part where I see changes and evolutions happening for the good are around data and privacy, because clearly consumers are getting more conscious and governments are also getting more conscious around what is private data, what is public data, and working with responsible companies who can manage that well, because there are many companies today in the world who would have access to your data. Consumers are wary about that. There are enough and more things which have gone wrong around in the industry. So I think that is another area where sometimes regulations will force responsibility. Sometimes some companies will themselves be well governed to be more responsible. But whichever way, that is going to change. So I think privacy will make consumers more confident to connect and share more, which is very, very important for any marketer. The connected journeys will ensure that marketers can map better around what's happening. So the entire connected journey measurement will come in. And consumption will get fast tracked with what's happening on your connected devices, on IoT, on connected TV. So a lot of those things will also evolve, I'm sure, in the years to come.
Right. So I think, coming to your, India strategy, right? I mean, India is a unique market, and, sort of, poses certain challenges as well as opportunities. And, I mean, talking about your 2V strategy, about verticalization and vernaculization. So can you sort of, share some insights about, sort of the Indian market in general, especially the vernacular segment?
So I think India is a very unique market. From the size, it's obviously super large. And there is, like, if you look at it from a population of a billion plus, smartphone penetration is close to around 600-700 million people are owning smartphones, which is also growing. But people who are transacting on the mobile, which is buying content or buying products and services on the mobile, is closer to 100, maybe 150 odd million is where they are. So there is a huge potential in a population of 1.2 billion. There will be more coming on the smartphones, and those who are coming on the smartphones, more will start transacting. So I think it's a volume market where the operating business metrics are not easy to navigate, because people always want high ROI, where the job of any platform like ours, where we need to filter who's likely to convert, who's not, becomes more challenging because you're dealing with so many more data points. Versus if you take a market like US, that the smartphone penetration and the commerce transactors on mobile are not too different from each other. Here, out of every 10, maybe one could be a potential transactor. So I think it's a very, very interesting market, which continues to grow, and there is no reason why that growth rate should even go down as the baselines are increasing. And I think that's where the role of vernacularization comes quite important, because if you see that today, internet in India, when it started evolving, internet was largely text internet. And text internet was also mostly English internet. I think a lot of that has changed, because internet has become a lot more video. And when internet becomes video, then the language barriers automatically go from there. And while vernacularization has happened on text, what we need to understand from an India nuance point of view is that you can have a website in English and Tamil and Telugu and Marathi, but it's still appealing to people who can read. When internet transcends into video, it's nothing to do with people who can read or write. It transcends to everybody. So I think that change is happening at a very, very rapid pace. And I think, I'm sure as consumers, we are watching it. There are enough trends in terms of how short video apps are growing, cutting through demographic or regional genres. So I think a lot of that is happening. So clearly consumers are consuming internet in vernacular ways, and there is no two ways around it. And that trend is only going to grow. And I think as companies which are trying to build business models around advertising on mobile, we need to embrace and welcome that change and build our business models around that vernacularization also. So today video is also very important in what we do. Audio is becoming more important. vernacular content, vernacular advertising, ensuring people are seeing things which are most relevant. Because our business model is around conversion. So we need to drive relevance, and vernacularization, verticalization are ways to get into relevance. Because final goal is relevance. Because if you are relevant, only then will you get interacted upon and converted. So all of these are means to that end.
The other thing is that, I mean, obviously you said that very few of these customers are actually transacting or in e-commerce. So it's important to sort of develop, have, robust customer profiles. And one of the factors that helps you is that you've been in the market for a long period of time. And you also have, technologies and AI and all these things to sort of, classify the customer profiles. So how do you sort of, how do you do this?
I think it's a constant innovation you need to do, because like while data is good, a lot of data is also can be a pain, because you need to do that much of filtration, because you need to reach the right data point where you can make the right prediction. So I think we are blessed to have a team which has got like good data scientists, good technologists, which have built models around that. Because as a company, we are not capturing any data which is private to you. So it's not like we are not identifying a user based on his or her phone number or email ID, name. None of that information is important. I think for us, it's more a device ID based intelligence which we built out. And I think that is where building the entire prediction algorithms, and I think those algorithms consistently with more data points which are supplied, and if they have the capability to filter the good data from the bad data, they can derive learnings. And I think that's where I always say that we are blessed with a great team which has built this out, and the platform is being tested every day, because every customer, every ad impression which we serve is testing us. And in case an algorithm is not giving its desired result, you don't need to wait long cycles to know that. You get to know in a daily, hourly, by minute, in terms of how our teams would analyze if it's working or not. And I think that's where you can rapidly innovate, correct if some model you deployed didn't leave the kind of results they expected. Go back to the old model, rebuild that, change the algorithm. So I think a lot of that is important, and I think there again having the entire organization channeled for the long term, welcoming innovation, welcoming learning. I think those to me are important things, because personally I'm not an expert in that area.
Your organization, you talk about culture, and the fact the value proposition to the customer and what the organization tries is totally aligned, also helps you sort of iterate quickly. I was going to some of your feedbacks from the customers and your customers on your channel. One people have pointed out is the fact that one of the value proposition that one of the things that they look forward to working with Affle is the fact that they don't have to deal too much with fraud. So I mean, one there are two questions really, right? So one is, how big is this problem as far as the Indian advertising is concerned, digital specifically? So let's say if there was a spend of 100 rupees, how much percentage probably would be fraud? That is one. And second, people have sort of complimented you on your MFAS platform, and how do you sort of detect fraud on a real time basis, thus minimizing wastage?
So I think it's difficult to quantify the impact, but clearly I think if you look at it in most, it's like any industry which is fast growing. While there'll be people who will take advantage, build models on the good side of it, but there'll also be things which are happening on the bad side. And what's happening on ad fraud, on the dark web, is largely things where people are misusing technology to create something which is possibly gains for themselves, but largely impacting the industry in a negative way. So the ad fraud is a reality which we need to live with. It is there. I think the important thing is that how do you reduce that fraud? And I think for us, that part, like for many companies, it becomes a way that because if I was in the business of selling impressions and clicks, then even if my platform was having some fraud, I don't get impacted by it. But given that Affle chose a business model around conversion, we have no option but to eradicate that fraud. Because if we don't eradicate that fraud, then the conversion ROI changes. So I think it was a business model led innovation that if we were not doing it, we would get impacted. So I think the urgency to press the accelerator there, innovate there. Like even recently, we got some of our patents granted in the US around what we have built around ad fraud, detection of ad fraud, many things. And there are quite a few patents, some which are granted, some which are in the entire life cycle of granting right now, which have helped us innovate and ensure that we can reduce that. I think nobody can claim to eradicate fraud because it's like a cat and mouse game, but clearly reduce it to an extent that it's not impacting the conversion business. And I think our business model made it imperative for us to innovate here. And I think that is super important, and we intend to continue there and ensure that we can reduce because if we deliver good quality, only then conversions happen, only then recurring relationships with advertisers happen. So it's kind of a cycle, and removing this becomes very important for it.
Okay. So how do you look at markets like India, Indonesia, and all these, and you contrast them to developed markets like the West, EU, and stuff like that? From point of view, entry barriers to competition, also from let's say consumer insights or maybe the way the market is structured.
So I think the developing markets, obviously markets like India, Indonesia, maybe the entire Southeast Asia belt, or even Latin America to an extent. I think all of these markets are very unique that they are growing at a very rapid pace. All the developing markets are growing very rapidly and in some cases skipping certain innovation cycles. Like if you look at India, India is a largely mobile internet market. It's not a PC internet market, unlike the US where still majority consumption happens on the PC or laptop. So I think it's skipping innovation cycles, which is interesting. And it's growing very fast. When both of these two things are happening, you would always see that there are companies which have built great businesses in developed markets wanting to reach and enter these markets. So I think these are lucrative markets, and AdTech is not the only industry. You see it across all industries. Companies wanting to grow their market share because that's where the next million, billion, whatever users which they are eyeing for would most likely come from. So I think these are lucrative markets, but also what is important is that the unit economics of these markets is not easy. So cracking the unit economics, ensuring that your algorithms are trained to filter to the kind of extent which is needed. And I think that's where we have been firm believers that companies and business models which have done successfully in developing markets might have a greater chance of success in developed markets vis-a-vis the reverse, while there will be always exceptions on both sides. And it's not really overarching statement. You will have enough successes of companies from developed markets doing well in developing markets and vice versa. But largely speaking, in our industry, that when the whole part is around data science and filtration, if you have built your models, trained those models to be cost efficient in markets like India or Indonesia or the developing world like Latin America, there is higher likelihood of you succeeding with the right unit economics in the developed markets. So I think that is what we are seeing, but we consistently see, I think regularly every few quarters, there are some good companies from outside who enter these markets. And I think it's interesting. It's a sign of how resilient these markets are and how lucrative they are because everybody is entering. But I think it's not an easy business from a unit economics. It's not an easy business from the data intelligence which you need to build. And I think that's where we need to keep innovating and keep learning. I think each company has enough strengths and we track it well and we hope that we can learn from each other. But the industry is good enough for all of us to grow together.
And who knows, you might partner with them one day. Actually building a talent pool of, entrepreneurs and founders. I mean, one good company which in India does that is Nazara, which is also doing some, which they call the Friends of Nazara Network. So, I mean, one of the ways, people generally sort of acquired and then founders and the people who are talented may not stick with these companies for very long, or they may go on to start something after their non-compete clause gets over. How do you retain these super talented founders and entrepreneurs to work with you? So one from a culture point of view, and the other is from, let's say, aligning their personal objectives to yours.
So I think a very important thing in the entrepreneurial journey for most people is that they have chosen to be entrepreneurs. A lot of people from the outside mistake it that people build or choose to become entrepreneurs for wealth creation. Well, that could be an objective for some people, but I think largely having Like most people who turned entrepreneurs were executives early. Some obviously start earlier, but most people have done their journeys and they didn't, the executive journey of working in a company didn't resonate with them and they chose an entrepreneurial route. I think the fear which a lot of entrepreneurs have in acquisition is that from an entrepreneur, I'll become back an executive or an employee. And that fear when ensures that many times acquisitions across the world, and there are so many examples, don't lead to the kind of alignment because suddenly the entire spirit of innovation, ownership, driving change is lost because you're part of a process or a employee as part of a large company. I think for us, I think what we have always learned, and we will obviously continue hopefully to learn there, is that how do you keep the entrepreneur alive without becoming an executive? And I think that's where the whole philosophy around everybody as equals, all of us are co-entrepreneurs today within the company. It's not that there are certain people who by history or time came in earlier, but doesn't mean that they know it better than those who came in later. So I think that as a culture is super important because when people see that, there is a higher likelihood of they continuing to stay inspired and continuing to stay entrepreneurs within a larger setup. And I think that is something which we've tried to build and imbibe. And I'm sure there are many more things which we need to learn there. But I think as a philosophy, we have seen that working well for us. And hopefully, we need to build that and ensure that we can attract more peer entrepreneurs to join as partners with us.
Balancing between independence, autonomy versus alignment, is a delicate sort of mix, and to be able to do that culturally is an enormously tough task, a lot tougher than what people would imagine how to be. Because
And
one of the things you pointed out was
especially in these times when you're not even meeting people and it's
Right.
all happening over Zoom calls and Google Meets. I think the last 1.5, 2 years have been dramatic in our business and most businesses because of that change also.
right, right. So how do you keep that vigor, that energy, that alignment going? Because I'm very curious because it's I mean you're acquiring companies across geographies, not just in India. And maybe entrepreneurs of different different times in their life cycles of different life stages the companies are in, and it's an assortment, and to sort of pull it all together and to deliver that growth that you are delivering is it's truly amazing, I would say.
I think it's largely, I think if you look at it, even when we started Affle, I think we were like, while obviously some of us within the founding team are Indians by origin, but I think we always started off as a company which is from India, building a business across many markets. So I think from a mindset culture point of view, we've always had teams like I think the original founder of the company, Anuj Khanna, so he and me have been in school together. So we've known each other for many, many years. But he moved to Singapore just after his class 10th and started two companies prior to Affle, which were based in Singapore. And even when we started, I was the first one to join in as to drive the growth in India, which was obviously a key market for us. But I think even at the early stages, within the first few months, we had more people working with us in Singapore, in other Southeast Asian markets. And I think it was a multicultural team. So I think it's always been a multicultural team. We've always, whether it is investors, partners, employees, I think team members, I think everybody, so I think cultural integrations has not been challenging that much for us because we've always thought of ourselves as a global company, might be located in one or two markets or maybe at a given point in time more focused in certain markets. But I think I've seen that some companies have the challenges on cultural integration. At least I don't see it. I'm sure others can speak better on it, but at least I don't see that impacting us. But and I think the part which I mentioned earlier around ensuring that you can join as a team of co-entrepreneurs while everybody might come with a different cultural background. But I think meeting of minds is very important, and I think that's where a lot more pre-time goes in terms of acquisition because more than the product or business or the revenue cash line items, I think it's very, very important to have the meeting of minds because you believe that you can run the marathon with these teams and it should be a mutual feeling. And I think that takes a lot of time, but I think really privileged, lucky, fortunate that we have been in the right spot, and blessed that we've had more co-entrepreneurs join us. So I think that spirit and keeping that alive is most important in my view.
So there seems to be a long courtship period before you actually sort of decide to get hitched in and you
Yeah.
tend to be following these guys' journeys over a long period of time to be able to develop that kind of sort of understanding and alignment even before the company comes in and becomes part of your entrepreneurial network. I mean, that is something that comes from what you're saying, that you've been tracking them or following them, and there's meeting
Yeah.
minds generally happens over a long period of time, doesn't really happen immediately on an impulse or being propelled by an investment banker saying there's something up for acquisition and let's go for it. So I think that might also be a subtle difference in your strategy.
Yeah, so I think as people we are all wired that way. Like long courtship periods versus speed dating. So
Awesome. As you were saying, as you were speaking about the journey, and right now also about the acquisitions, what struck me, Anuj, as the real blessing is having the right spirit. In your case, it's so evident, that the values that would be driving is respect for each other, and respecting the differences, and having a very nice attitude towards change, being excited about it rather than getting unnerved, and rooted in the right fundamentals. So that's amazing. With that, I have two areas. One is slightly broader, which is where do you see digital advertising industry moving? I mean, we are talking about all the changes. I'm not going to repeat here, but especially in case of digital voice assistants and wearables of an embedded, where do you see the future of digital advertising going?
I think it's the entire experiences are going to be blended. So I think how the voice assistants are growing, how IoT is growing. I think there are many more devices which are connected to the internet, and I think enough estimates around the world that how many billions of devices will be connected to the internet in the next few years. So I think the entire experiences will be that what is like, and I think that's where the entire experience that like today it is easy to figure out that you bought something. Tomorrow you could just delegate that buying to your voice assistant. Buy me this. And that assistant is making a search on the internet and figuring out the best deal, find me a ticket to Bombay, and figuring out whatever which portal is selling the biggest best ticket versus the airline, knowing all your options. So a lot of delegated commerce will happen. And I think that's where advertising will also need to evolve, because earlier you were playing to an emotional connect with users. That, okay, I will book a flight ticket on an XYZ airline because I resonate with that brand. Now there is a functional decision making because you are not actually making that decision. Your voice assistant is figuring out, okay, this person likes this kind of a seat, he likes this price point, works for him, and based on that, a decision is made. So I think advertising also a lot of data, because then the whole thing will be, and this is an interesting area where advertising will evolve, that you're not then advertising to humans. You're creating a way that how is the machine going to choose one over the other. So, and I see that happening at a very rapid pace, because as consumers, we are naturally moving some actions in that direction, and we won't even realize that in the next 2 to 3 years, how many more actions will move there. And when that is happening, then your emotional relationship with the brands is lesser. And because it's a transactional decision, how does advertising play a role there? How does impact, like, can you emotionally influence a bot? Maybe there are technologies around that. But I think, yeah, but I think those are interesting areas where content and optimization, data-led things, data-led pricing, that okay, this bot wants to buy this thing, so how can I alter my offering to ensure that this bot likes me versus that bot? So I think there'll be interesting areas for sure.
Super persuasion model for the bots.
Yeah. It's not. I think today we can. Yeah, I think today we can find it humorous. I think 3 years from now on this very channel, I'm sure you'll have somebody coming in as an expert that okay, I can emotionally connect with bots.
Yeah.
So,
a moment here. This is a prediction by Anuj. Superb. So, Anuj, now would you like to share some use case, for Affle India, for our audiences, so they can appreciate, the granular aspects of it, more tangible. Any examples where, Affle's partnership helped a company get over the challenges, or what the impact of it was? Any online, offline? Would you like to?
So I think there are many. So we work with pretty much most of the top advertisers across markets. I think we talk about EFGH as our key verticals where we focus on, which is just making it easier for people to understand the industry verticals we go after. But I think we also started last quarter around sharing as part of our earnings presentation certain case studies of advertisers, how they are benefiting from our platform. And largely, when you will go through many of these case studies, I think the key important thing is that trackability of ROI. So some of those companies are leading e-commerce, food tech kind of companies where they are seeing that they invest 100, they get 200, 500, whatever their metrics of ROI are out of it. And I think our data science algorithms take over and figure out which user, based on their location, based on their past order history, behavior, customize the communication which you would see on the same app versus what I would see, and which leads to greater conversions. So I think that's clearly for the online first companies, and for the offline first companies, clearly driving more visits to their stores, driving more in-store bookings, trials. So I think it's largely around that. So we have enough and more use cases. I think as a public company, we also talk about some of these only after the advertisers allow us to. I think there is enough in public domain around what we do, what kind of work we've been doing. Also, thankfully, there are many industry award shows which keep happening where we submit our entries around how certain campaigns, be it for Swiggy or Tokopedia or different companies across the world, are benefiting from what we're doing. So I think there are enough and more, and I think that part is only growing, because the interesting part in our industry is that our captive advertiser set is growing very fast. Because if you think of it versus traditional media, TV has a certain kind of advertisers. Now the industries who are advertising on TV are not possibly growing as dramatically. For us, if we are going into e-commerce, fintech, health tech, that is where possibly OTT, entertainment, this is where most amount of innovation is happening. Every given day, there are new players who are emerging there, either global players entering markets where we are present, or Indian domestic companies who are innovating. So I think that is creating that new advertisers are being born by the day, and these advertisers are tech first, data first, ROI first versus awareness kind of models which have traditionally been wired in CPG, consumer electronics kind of industries where initial advertisers really came in from. So
Awesome. I'm wondering if we should talk about the blended view of the consumer journey, the online and offline, the combination, which is a unique thing that Affle India will be able to do now because of the partnership with MediaSmart. Would you like to talk about that?
I think we've been doing that. I think that's a key part of our strategy. I think I mentioned that earlier, that what we see is consumers are not stuck to that they will complete a transaction. You might search at one place, buy on another, which could be online, could be online, offline. And marrying those journeys is super important. And I think any kind of technology innovation which is allowing us to do that. So we do that from drive to store tracking is one measurement, which is what we do, which is driving, like measuring incremental footfalls to a store, which can happen because sometimes footfall measurement itself is flawed, because if say a store is in a place which is on way to your office area, if I'm just measuring footfall, then possibly I'm crossing that place every day. That is not true footfall, because and how do you measure incremental impact of the footfall which is caused by an ad? So that is one area which is where we work. The second is around doing the entire transaction, where the ad itself could lead to a chatbot. You could figure out what kind of offers the product has, make a booking to the store, connect, do a video demonstration with the store manager, and for a lot of categories that makes a lot of sense. So I think the online offline blending of journeys is important, and we're doing a lot of work there. But I also know that we possibly do a lot more because consumer journeys, the number of devices which are involved in that journey are also changing quite fast.
Guys, just to have a look at their channel, and there are a lot of testimonials from Meesho, Zimame, and Policy Bazaar and stuff like that. And people, one of these clients or customers has talked about how you've integrated their paid channels as well as their CRM channels, and that's been done wonderfully well. So I suggest everybody goes and has a look at Apple's channels, especially the YouTube channel. You'll find some good case studies for you to actually refer to.
Thanks for that. I think it's super important because if you look at it today, marketers also have started training their minds to thinking that this is one channel, this is the journey, this is my communication on my push notification versus an email versus a social ad. How do you marry that? How do you ensure? Because consumers are not like, I am the same guy who looks at your email, who looks at your social channel. Can there be a journey which can be mapped around who's seeing what and what's happening after that? And I think this is an evolving area of innovation, and we see this that if really, and I think if we can just optimize that entire journey, it can result in greater ROI. And greater ROI for sure then means that the enterprise can spend more because they can see greater returns from what they spend.
Are under rapid fire. Okay.
Oh, very nice. That's very innovative.
That's the right word coming from Anuj.
I'm actually, this is my first experience of answering questions at a gunpoint.
What's something new happening in your life right now?
Cocktail making.
Lovely.
So which is your favorite cocktail that you made recently?
Oh, these days I'm making the Negroni, which I love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What, if you had to, what would you change about yourself?
Time management.
Okay. Your guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. It's my evening out with friends at the bar.
Everything seems to be revolving around the bars and the cocktails and everything.
No. It's just that the questions, I think you have trained your questioning algorithm to ask questions that way.
Yeah. He could detect it early, you see. Okay. If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
Children's education.
What is your deepest fear?
Being alone.
Your greatest joy?
Travel.
Not drinking at a bar?
No. Travel far exceeds that.
What would you like strangers to remember you? How would you like strangers to remember you?
A simple, relatable person.
What's a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
That I can learn more things from others than what I believe I know myself.
Awesome. What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
None. I'm super happy.
Yay. What's next? Just one more. What's next?
My next meeting.
Okay. Totally living in the moment. Awesome. Superb. 10 on 10.
Yeah. So do I get a coffee hamper or something?
Yeah.
I mean, all
Online.
your partying thing reminded me of a Nawabi heritage. That hasn't left you.
Not at all. Not at all. I think. Very close to the Nawabi heritage.
Yes. Anuj, would you like to now share with our audiences your online addresses?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter on Anuj Kumar 13. If you want to find me outside on email, you can just write to me at findanujkumar@gmail.com. And I think those are two good ways to connect with me. LinkedIn is easy to search and find, and I'm sure you would find me responsive to whatever you're communicating. I try and ensure that is always the case. Thank you, Mr. Savi. I think this is the channel to watch if you are within marketing, advertising, business, or just looking for some fun insights and nuggets and knowing new people who are very interesting. I think this is the channel to be on. So like, subscribe it. Great channel to be on.
Yay!